It was a sunny Tuesday morning when the big moving truck rolled into Pine Creek neighborhood. The truck crawled down Maple Street and stopped at the empty house at the end of the quiet cul-de-sac. This wasn't just any Tuesday. This was the day that would change everything for the self-appointed king of Pine Creek, John Miller. John had lived in this peaceful suburb for nearly 16 years. With his tidy lawn and position as head of the neighborhood watch, he felt like he owned the place. He knew whose dog barked too much, which teenager came home past curfew, and who forgot to bring in their trash cans on time. Nothing happened in Pine Creek without John knowing about it. "Hey, Mike, look out your window," John spoke urgently into his phone. "Someone's moving into the old Wilson place." Within minutes, John had called his usual group, Mike, Tom, and Ray, the guys who shared beers on Friday nights and thought they ran the neighborhood. The four men gathered casually on John's front porch, pretending to drink coffee while they watched the scene unfold across the street. They weren't subtle about their staring. The moving truck door slid open with a metallic screech. Out stepped a muscular guy with a clean-shaven head. He wore a simple white t-shirt that stretched across broad shoulders, faded jeans, and work boots. Without looking around, he began unloading boxes by himself, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Check out Mr. Clean over there," John snorted, keeping his voice just low enough that it wouldn't carry across the street, not even a hello to the neighbors. Tom sipped his coffee with a smirk. Maybe he thinks he's too important to say hi. "Probably some gym rat who spends all day looking at himself in the mirror," Ray added, though he subconsciously sucked in his own growing belly as he said it. They watched as the bald man lifted a heavy-looking wooden desk from the truck bed like it weighed nothing, carrying it into the house without breaking a sweat. "Show off," mumbled Mike. What these neighborhood buddies didn't realize, couldn't possibly guess, was that the quiet, strong man carefully arranging boxes on his new front lawn was none other than Vin Diesel, one of Hollywood's biggest action stars. He wasn't being unfriendly, he was being careful. After years in the spotlight, with cameras constantly following him, Vin had deliberately chosen this ordinary neighborhood as a place to disappear for a while. He needed somewhere real, somewhere normal to prepare for his next big role. Somewhere he could breathe without paparazzi hiding in bushes. Somewhere people would treat him like a regular person, though perhaps not quite the cold welcome he was getting now. John leaned forward on his porch railing. "We should go introduce ourselves," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Let Mr. Muscles know how things work around here." "Tomorrow," Tom suggested. "Let him get settled first. Then we'll drop by and explain the neighborhood rules." They'd all nodded in agreement, already planning how they'd establish their dominance over the newcomer. They had no idea that the man they were about to try intimidating had fought fictional street racers, criminals, and even actual monsters on the big screen. As evening approached, Vin finished unloading the last of his essential boxes. He stood in his driveway, feeling the weight of judgmental stares from behind nearby curtains. He could sense the tension already. He'd felt it many times before. But unlike his action hero characters, he wouldn't solve this with dramatic confrontations. No, he would do what he always did in real life: stay quiet, stay kind, and let his actions speak for themselves. Little did the neighborhood know that their ordinary Tuesday had just become extraordinary. The balance of power was about to shift, though not in the way anyone expected, not even Vin himself. 3 days passed since the mysterious bald man moved in. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers and theories about him. Some folks said he might be an ex-military guy because of how he carried himself. Others thought maybe he was running from something or someone. But John and his pals had decided one thing for sure: this guy needed to understand who really ran Pine Creek. Thursday afternoon brought perfect weather, sunny but not too hot. John spotted the new neighbor working under the hood of an impressive black muscle car. Tools were spread out on a clean shop towel beside him as he focused intensely on whatever he was fixing. "Perfect timing," John said, grabbing his phone. He sent a quick text to the group chat: "New guys outside. Time for the welcome committee." 20 minutes later, John, Mike, Tom, and Ray strolled down the street like they owned it. Each man puffed up his chest a little more with every step closer to the newcomer's driveway. "Hey there, neighbor," John called out with fake friendliness that didn't match his eyes. "Figured it was time we properly welcomed you to Pine Creek." The bald man slowly straightened up from under the hood. He was taller than he looked from a distance, with shoulders that filled out his plain gray t-shirt impressively. His hands were covered in grease, which he carefully wiped on a rag before turning to face them. "Appreciated," he said simply, his voice surprisingly deep and gravelly, like tires on a rough road. There was something familiar about that voice, but none of the men could quite place it. "I'm John. I run the neighborhood watch and the homeowners association." He didn't offer his hand for a shake, noticing the grease still under the man's fingernails. "These are my buddies, Mike, Tom, and Ray. We've all been here since they built these houses." The bald man nodded politely. "Nice to meet you all. I'm—" He paused for just a half-second. "Vincent." "That's some car," Ray said, eyeing the sleek black machine. "Bit loud for our neighborhood though, don't you think? We've got kids who nap during the day." Vincent patted the car's fender gently, almost affectionately. "She's actually pretty quiet when she's running right, just working out a few kinks." John stepped closer, invading Vincent's personal space just enough to make a point. "So, Vincent, there are a few things you should know about living here. We take pride in Pine Creek. Lawns get mowed every Saturday. Trash cans don't stay on the curb past collection day. And that rock pile you've started in the front yard." He pointed towards some natural stones Vincent had arranged near the mailbox. "That's not really our aesthetic here." "Thanks for the tips," Vincent said calmly, his expression giving away nothing. "The rocks are just temporary. Planning something more interesting there." Mike snickered. "And what's with the bold look? Military? Or just hiding a bad hairline?" Vincent ran a hand over his smooth head. "Just prefer it this way. Easier to maintain." "Well," Tom jumped in, "there's a neighborhood barbecue this weekend at the park. Everyone will be there. You should come, meet everyone at once, learn how things work around here." His tone suggested it wasn't really an invitation, but more of a summons. "A barbecue sounds good," Vincent replied, his deep voice warming slightly. "What can I bring?" John laughed a little too loudly. "New folks always bring the drinks. It's tradition." Vincent nodded again, his face still unreadable. "Got it. Drinks." An awkward silence followed it as the four men stared at Vincent, waiting for him to seem intimidated. He didn't. Instead, he picked up a wrench and turned back to his car. "Well, I should finish this before dark. See you gentlemen at the barbecue." The dismissal was subtle but clear. John's face reddened slightly as he realized they'd been essentially told to leave. "Yeah, we'll see you there," John said, his voice harder now. "Don't forget, lots of drinks. Pine Creek residents get thirsty." As they walked away, Ray whispered, "That guy thinks he's so cool with his fancy car." "Did you hear that voice?" Tom added, trying to sound all tough and movie star-like. John glanced back over his shoulder. Something was off about this Vincent guy. He wasn't reacting right. Most new people tried hard to fit in to be liked. This guy seemed completely unbothered by their opinions. "Don't worry," John assured his friends once they were out of earshot. "The barbecue will put him in his place. Nobody stands alone against all of Pine Creek." What they didn't know was that Vincent, or rather Vin Diesel, had spent his entire career playing outsiders who eventually won over their toughest critics. And he wasn't acting now. This was real life, and he was just getting started. Saturday arrived bright and sunny, perfect weather for the Pine Creek annual barbecue. By noon, the neighborhood park buzzed with activity. Kids raced around the playground while adults set up folding tables covered with red and white checkered cloths. The smell of charcoal and grilling meat filled the air. John and his buddies had arrived early to claim the best spot, right next to the main grill area. They stood in a tight circle, drinking beers and occasionally glancing toward the park entrance. "Think Mr. Muscles will actually show up?" Mike asked, popping open another can. Tom snorted. "He better. And he better bring enough drinks for everyone like we told him." Speaking of which, Ray nudged John, pointing toward the park entrance. There he was, Vincent, walking into the park carrying two large coolers that would have strained most men. He wore simple blue jeans and a black t-shirt that somehow looked expensive despite being plain. A pair of aviator sunglasses covered his eyes as he scanned the gathering. Several neighbors turned to look. A few women whispered to each other, their eyes following the newcomer with obvious interest. "Great," John muttered. Lisa's mom is practically drooling. Vincent set down the coolers near the community drink table and began unloading them. Inside were fancy bottled waters, craft sodas, and several varieties of beer, all top brands, not the cheap stuff usually brought to these events. John nudged his friends. Time to welcome our new neighbor properly. They moved as a unit, surrounding Vincent before he could join the main party. John stepped directly in front of him, blocking his path. Well, John said loudly enough for nearby folks to hear. Look who decided to join us. Did you bring enough for everyone, Vincent? Vincent removed his sunglasses, tucking them into his shirt collar. I think so. 2 coolers full. Pretty fancy choices, Ray commented, picking up one of the craft beers. Trying to show off. Vincent shrugged. Just brought what I enjoy drinking. Tom crossed his arms. You know, there's a way things work around here at these gatherings. New folks usually check in with the organizers first. He nodded toward John. My mistake, Vincent said simply. I'm still learning the local customs. John stepped closer. And what's that you've got there? He pointed to a covered dish Vincent had set on the table. Just something my grandmother used to make. Family recipe. Vincent lifted the cover, revealing a beautifully prepared dish that smelled amazing, some kind of spiced meat and rice blend. Well, John said with exaggerated slowness, tradition says new neighbors bring drinks, not food. We already have plenty of food arranged. He made no move to make space for Vincent's dish on the community table. Before Vincent could respond, Bill, the neighborhood's oldest resident, wandered over. He peered at the dish through thick glasses. What's that you've got there, young man? Smells wonderful. Vincent smiled, his first genuine smile since arriving. It's a dish my grandmother taught me to make. Would you like to try some? Don't mind if I do, Bill said, already reaching for the serving spoon. John quickly stepped in. Actually, Bill, we're not quite ready to eat yet. We're still setting up. He turned to Vincent. And we have a certain order to things here. Throughout the afternoon, the pattern continued. Whenever Vincent tried to join a conversation, John or one of his friends would interrupt. They accidentally bumped into him twice, causing him to spill his drink. When he offered to help at the grill, they said they had it covered. They made loud jokes about action movies being just explosions for people who can't follow real plots. Despite their efforts, many neighbors seemed drawn to the newcomer. Kids especially liked him after he helped a little boy retrieve a frisbee stuck in a tree, climbing up with surprising agility for such a muscular man. By late afternoon, the division was clear. John and his small crew continued their petty campaign, but Vincent had won over several families with nothing more than his patient smile, respectful manner, and willingness to help wherever needed. As the sun began to set, Vincent gathered his empty coolers, said polite goodbyes to his new acquaintances, and headed home. His dish, now just an empty container, had been completely devoured despite John's attempts to sideline it. This isn't over, John said as they watched Vincent leave. Something's not right about that guy. Did you see how he climbed that tree? And that voice, I swear I've heard it somewhere before. Maybe on one of those home renovation shows, Tom suggested. He's probably just some contractor trying to act important. Little did they know that Vincent's face had appeared on something much bigger than renovation shows, like movie screens around the world. And the real show in Pine Creek was just beginning. Linda Miller pushed her shopping cart through the supermarket on Wednesday afternoon, mentally checking off items on her list. As John's wife, she had heard plenty about the mysterious bold newcomer who had supposedly been disrupting the neighborhood harmony. According to her husband, the guy was rude, standoffish, and thought he was better than everyone else. She rounded the corner to the magazine aisle, looking for the cooking magazine that had promised the perfect summer pie recipe. That's when she saw it. Her hand froze midair, reaching for a magazine but suddenly unable to move. There on the glossy cover of Movie World stood the very same bald man from down the street. The bold yellow headline shouted, Vin Diesel joys UNDLCOVR. Living among everyday Americans for €. Linda grabbed the magazine so quickly she almost tore the cover. She flipped to the article inside, her eyes scanning rapidly. According to the piece, the famous action star was preparing for a role as an ordinary man who faces neighborhood bullying before eventually transforming his community through quiet strength and genuine connection. "Oh my God," she whispered, earning a curious look from an elderly shopper nearby. "John's been bullying Vin Diesel." She abandoned her half-filled cart and rushed to the checkout with only the magazine. This couldn't wait. 20 minutes later, Linda burst through her front door, out of breath from running from the car. "John," she called, her voice high with urgency. "John, you need to see this right now." John wandered in from the backyard where he'd been grilling. "What's the big emergency?" She thrust the magazine at him, jabbing her finger at the cover. "Your new neighbor. The one you and your friends have been tormenting. Look at him." John's face went from confusion to disbelief as he stared at the familiar bald head and strong features on the magazine cover. "No way," he whispered, taking the magazine from her hands. "That's impossible." "Read it," Linda insisted. "It's him. It's really him. Vincent is Vin Diesel. The Vin Diesel. The fast and furious guy. The action hero." John sank into a kitchen chair, flipping through the article with shaking hands. The piece described how Diesel was living in a quiet suburban community while researching his upcoming role as a regular guy who transforms his neighborhood. It mentioned how the star wanted to experience real community dynamics firsthand, without the filter of celebrity. "This can't be real," John muttered, but the photographic evidence was undeniable. The same eyes, the same build, the same everything. Their new neighbor was one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. John's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Dude, are you seeing this? Channel 6 Entertainment News." John scrambled for the remote and flipped on the TV. There it was, a perky entertainment reporter standing on a street that looked suspiciously like the entrance to Pine Creek. Sources confirmed that action superstar Vin Diesel has been living incognito in this quiet suburban neighborhood as part of his preparation for his upcoming film Ordinary Hero. Locals have reportedly been unaware of the celebrity in their midst, treating him as they would any new resident, for better or worse. John's stomach dropped. "They're going to put us in his movie," he whispered. "As the bad guys." His phone started blowing up with messages from neighbors. Everyone was making the connection now. "All those things we said to him," John groaned, remembering the barbecue, the snide comments about action movies, the deliberate exclusion. "He's probably got it all on tape somewhere." Linda crossed her arms, giving him a look that said he deserved every bit of his current discomfort. "Maybe you should have been nicer to the new neighbor, celebrity or not." By evening, the news had ripped through Pine Creek like wildfire. Neighbors who had followed John's lead in cold shouldering Vincent were now mortified. Those who had been kind to the newcomer despite John's influence were suddenly local heroes in their own minds. John's phone rang. It was Mike. "What are we going to do?" Mike's voice sounded panicked. "My kids have all his action figures. They're going to kill me when they find out I was mean to him." "I don't know," John admitted. For the first time in years, he felt his position as neighborhood leader crumbling beneath him. People who used to seek his approval were now avoiding eye contact when he looked out the window. The worst part, Vincent, or rather Vin, continued his usual routine. He jogged in the morning, worked on his car in the afternoon, and waved politely to anyone he passed, seemingly oblivious to the complete chaos he had unwittingly unleashed in Pine Creek. But John knew one thing for certain: something had to be done. And soon. The next 3 days in Pine Creek felt like living in a strange dream. People who normally drove past their neighbors without a second glance now crawled by Vincent's house, hoping for a glimpse of the celebrity in their midst. Kids rode their bikes in loops around his block. More than a few neighbors had suddenly found reasons to do yard work whenever Vincent stepped outside. For John, the situation was a nightmare. His phone had stopped ringing. The guys who used to show up for his weekend poker games made excuses about family obligations. Even Bill, the old-timer who'd been friendly with John for years, crossed the street to avoid talking to him. "This is ridiculous," John muttered as he peered through his living room blinds. Outside, a group of teenage girls were taking selfies in front of Vincent's mailbox. "He's just an actor, not the president." Linda gave him a look that could have frozen boiling water. "Just an actor? John, he's one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and you've been treating him like dirt. The whole neighborhood followed your lead, and now everyone's terrified they'll end up looking like jerks in his movie." John sank onto the couch. "What am I supposed to do? Send him a fruit basket with a note saying sorry I didn't recognize you from your billion-dollar movie franchise?" Maybe start with a genuine apology, Linda suggested, not unkindly. Celebrity or not, you weren't exactly welcoming. But apologizing wasn't easy for a man like John. He'd been the neighborhood's unofficial leader for so long that admitting he was wrong felt impossible. Instead, he stayed inside, watching the community he thought he controlled completely transform. Across the street, Tom was dealing with his own crisis. His 14-year-old son had discovered that his dad had been rude to his all-time favorite action hero. "Dad, how could you?" the boy had wailed. "He's Vin Diesel, he's Groot, he's Dominic Toretto." In Mike's house, things weren't much better. His wife had grown up with a poster of the action star on her bedroom wall and was now refusing to speak to him except to ask if he'd apologized yet. Ray had taken the most extreme approach, had gone on an impromptu fishing trip that everyone knew was just hiding until the situation blew over. Meanwhile, Vincent continued his daily routine as if nothing had changed. He jogged every morning, worked on his car in the afternoon, and politely waved to the growing number of neighbors who now stopped to chat with him. If he noticed the increased attention, he didn't show it. On Thursday evening, as John was grilling burgers in his backyard, he spotted Vincent helping Mrs. Chen, an elderly neighbor, carry her groceries inside. The action star easily managed 6 heavy bags, chatting casually with the older woman who was clearly delighted by his company. "Look at him," John grumbled to himself, acting all perfect and friendly. But even as he complained, something uncomfortable twisted in John's stomach. Vincent had been like that from the beginning. Helpful, respectful, quiet. It was John and his friends who had turned it into a power struggle. When Vincent emerged from Mrs. Chen's house and headed home, he passed by John's fence. For a moment, their eyes met. John quickly looked away, pretending to be deeply focused on his burgers. But not before he saw something unexpected in Vincent's expression, not anger or smugness, just a simple acknowledgement. That night, as John lay awake staring at the ceiling, he realized something had to change. His position in the neighborhood was crumbling. People who used to respect him now avoided him. And worse, deep down, he knew he deserved it. "I need to talk to him," John finally said to Linda as the first light of dawn crept through their curtains. "Not because he's Vin Diesel, but because I was wrong." Linda, who had been waiting days for this realization, simply nodded. "Yes, you do. And John, make it genuine. That man has probably dealt with fake people his entire career. The last thing he needs is another one." John took a deep breath. "Tomorrow. I'll go over there tomorrow." What John didn't know was that tomorrow would change everything in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. Saturday morning arrived with a gentle rain that seemed to wash the neighborhood clean. John had barely slept, rehearsing what he would say to Vincent over and over in his mind. By 10 a.m., the rain had stopped, leaving everything with that fresh, just-washed smell. John stood in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to recognize the man staring back at him. For years, he'd seen himself as the neighborhood's natural leader, respected, even a little feared. Now he felt like a fool. "Just do it," he muttered to his reflection. "It's just a conversation." But it wasn't just any conversation, and Vincent wasn't just any neighbor. At exactly 11:15, John walked across the street, each step feeling heavier than the last. His palms were sweaty as he reached Vincent's front door. He took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Nothing happened for so long that John almost turned to leave. Then the door swung open. Vincent stood there in a simple black t-shirt and jeans. Up close, there was no denying it. This was definitely Vin Diesel, the action star whose face had appeared on movie posters all over the world. Yet somehow he seemed more real in person, less like a larger-than-life character and more like, well, a regular guy who happened to be famous. "John," Vincent said, his deep voice neutral. Not friendly, but not hostile either. "Vincent," John started, then stopped himself. "Or I guess, Mr. Diesel. I'm not sure what to call you now." A slight smile crossed Vincent's face. "Vincent works fine." An awkward silence stretched between them. John cleared his throat. "Look, I know who you are now. Everyone does. And I want to apologize for how we treated you. It was wrong. Celebrity or not, you deserved better." Vincent studied John's face, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stepped back from the doorway. "Want to come in?" "I just made coffee." Surprised by the invitation, John nodded and stepped inside. He'd expected yelling, maybe even a door slammed in his face, not coffee. The inside of Vincent's house wasn't what John had expected either. No movie posters or awards, no fancy furniture or expensive art. It was comfortable but simple, a home, not a showcase. On the dining table were scripts and notes. A few family photos hung on the walls, showing Vincent with what looked like his mom and siblings. "Have a seat," Vincent said, gesturing toward the kitchen table while he poured 2 mugs of coffee. "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine," John replied, still taking in his surroundings. "I have to ask, the movie, are you going to show what happened here, with us?" Vincent set a mug in front of John and sat down across from him. "You mean, am I going to make you the villain in my next blockbuster?" John nodded, his stomach twisting with anxiety. Vincent leaned back in his chair. "This isn't about a movie, John. Not everything is." "But the magazine article was mostly hype," Vincent finished. "Yes, I'm researching a role. But more importantly, I wanted somewhere quiet where I could just be a person for a while. Do you have any idea how rare that is for me?" John hadn't thought about it that way. "I guess not. Everywhere I go, people want something, autographs, photos, a piece of my time or attention. I thought maybe in a regular neighborhood I could just exist, be judged on who I am, not what I do for a living." John winced. "Except we judged you anyway." "Yes, you did," Vincent agreed, but there was no anger in his voice. "Why was that?" The question caught John off guard. He'd expected accusations, not curiosity. "I don't know," he said automatically, then stopped himself. "No, that's not true. I do know. I've lived here for 16 years. This neighborhood has been my kingdom, I guess. Then you showed up, different, confident, not needing my approval, and I felt threatened." Vincent nodded slowly. "I know something about that. In my world, there's always someone new coming up, someone who might take your spot." "How do you deal with it?" John asked. "By remembering that other people's success doesn't diminish mine. There's room for all of us." They talked for over an hour. John found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, how his father had always criticized him, how he built his sense of self-worth on being in control of his small corner of the world, how terrified he was of becoming irrelevant. Vincent listened, really listened, without judgment. Then he shared stories of his own, the struggle to be taken seriously as an actor, the challenge of maintaining privacy, his search for authentic connections in a world where people often wanted to use him for his fame. As their coffee grew cold, John realized something surprising. He was actually enjoying their conversation. Not because he was talking to a celebrity, but because he was talking to a thoughtful, genuine person. "So what happens now?" John finally asked. Vincent shrugged. "That's partly up to you. I'll be here for another 3 months before filming starts." "And the movie? Will it show what happened here?" "The movie will tell a story about community, about how people can change and grow. Beyond that," Vincent smiled, "I guess you'll have to buy a ticket like everyone else." As John stood to leave, he felt lighter somehow. "I really am sorry, you know." "I know," Vincent said simply. "See you around, neighbor." Walking back to his house, John realized the real story wasn't about living next to Vin Diesel. It was about learning to see people, all people, for who they really were, not who he wanted them to be. 3 months passed like a gentle breeze through Pine Creek. Summer faded into early fall, painting the neighborhood trees with splashes of gold and crimson. But the changing leaves weren't the only transformation taking place. The morning after his conversation with Vincent, John had done something that shocked everyone. He resigned from his position as head of the Homeowners Association. In the email he sent to all residents, he wrote simply, "It's time for new ideas and new leadership. I've held on too long." The news spread quickly. Some neighbors suspected Vincent had somehow forced John out, but those rumors died when people saw the 2 men chatting amicably while working together on Vincent's front yard landscaping project the following weekend. "You're really good at this," Vincent had commented, watching John expertly arrange river stones around newly planted shrubs. "Spent summers working for a landscaper in high school," John admitted. "Haven't done it in years, but some skills you never forget." Word got around that John was helping people with their yards, not to control how they looked, but to genuinely help. Tom and Mike, following John's lead, found their own ways to contribute. Tom, who worked as an accountant, offered free tax advice to elderly neighbors. Mike, a hobby carpenter, started fixing broken fences and wobbly porches for families too busy to handle repairs. Meanwhile, Vincent had quietly become the neighborhood's unexpected heart. He never mentioned his celebrity status, and gradually, people stopped treating him like a movie star. Instead, they appreciated him for who he actually was: a good listener, a reliable neighbor, and someone who genuinely cared. The biggest surprise came when Vincent transformed his garage into a weekend workshop for neighborhood kids. Every Saturday morning, children gathered to learn basic car maintenance, build simple machines, or just talk about life. Parents initially brought their kids because of the celebrity factor, but kept bringing them back because Vincent treated each child with genuine respect and interest. "My son never liked science before," one mother told Linda at the grocery store. "Now he's talking about becoming an engineer because of Mr. Vincent's workshop." By the time October arrived, Pine Creek had become almost unrecognizable compared to the rigidly structured community it had been. People who had lived next door to each other for years without really talking were now borrowing tools, sharing garden harvests, and actually getting to know one another. The annual Fall Festival, usually a formal, tightly scheduled event, transformed into a genuine celebration. Instead of John dictating every detail, a committee of diverse neighbors planned it together. Vincent volunteered to handle the grills, teaching a few interested residents his grandmother's secret recipes along the way. As evening fell on the festival, fairy lights twinkled in the trees of the community park. Children darted between game booths while adults gathered around fire pits, sharing stories and laughter. John found himself sitting next to Vincent, watching the community they had both, in different ways, helped reshape. "Your movie starts filming soon?" John asked, though he already knew the answer. Vincent nodded. "Monday. My stuff gets moved out tomorrow. The neighborhood won't be the same without you." "I think Pine Creek will do just fine," Vincent said, gesturing toward the gathering. "Look at what you've all built together." John watched as Tom's teenage son helped an elderly neighbor to a chair, then sat down to actually talk with her rather than rushing back to his friends. Nearby, Mike and his wife were teaching another couple a dance move, all four laughing at their missteps. "I keep thinking about what you said," John admitted, "about other people's success not diminishing mine. I spent so many years trying to be the big fish in a small pond that I never realized how much bigger the pond could be if we all worked together." Vincent smiled. "That's the thing about community, it's not a competition, it's a collaboration." As the evening grew later, Bill, the oldest resident, shuffled to the center of the gathering and called for attention. "I've lived in Pine Creek for 32 years, he announced, his voice wavering with age but strong with conviction. "And I've never seen our neighborhood so alive. Before Mr. Vincent leaves us, I think we should thank him, not because he's famous, but because he reminded us what it means to be neighbors." The crowd erupted in applause. Vincent, clearly moved, stood and raised his hand in acknowledgement. But then he did something unexpected. He pulled John to his feet as well. "The change didn't start with me," Vincent said, his deep voice carrying across the park. "It started when one person had the courage to look at himself honestly and choose to be better. That's the real hero of this story." The applause that followed was deafening. John, never comfortable being the center of attention for good reasons, felt his face flush with embarrassment, but also with pride. The next morning, as Vincent loaded the last of his belongings into his car, John walked across the street to say goodbye. "Will your movie show what happened here?" John asked, the question that had worried him for months now feeling strangely unimportant. Vincent smiled. "Some of it. But the real story is still being written right here, long after I'm gone." As they shook hands, John realized something important. The true transformation in Pine Creek wasn't about living next door to a movie star. It was about learning that real strength comes not from controlling others, but from connecting with them. Not from being feared, but from being genuine. It was a lesson worth more than any Hollywood script could capture, and one that would continue changing lives in Pine Creek long after the credits rolled.